Well, with Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker soon upon us, I figured it was a good idea to look back at all the Star Wars films and discuss them. Well, and I won't be dealing with the side deals like TV shows with the cartoons, none of the comic books or novels, primarily because my knowledge of those is quite minimal. So it wouldn't be fair to those for me to say, oh, this was done here and that, and then after this they did this, and the Clone Wars, and won't be doing that. We'll just be sticking to the films, including the standalones that we now have throughout the series, and in chronological order. So instead of starting with the first film I saw back in '77, no, we'll start with, of course, the first episode in the prequel series. So here we go. Yes, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a Phantom Menace. Yes, this was the first of the prequels that George Lucas had teased for years and finally delivered because of the numbering of the original trilogy. All of a sudden, the first movie was actually episode 4. So that meant there were 3 other episodes that had to be told, and so we began with the Phantom Menace. Now, of course, it begins with the introductory crawl, a gimmick stolen from old Flash Gordon movie serials, where it explains where you are and what this story's about and where it begins and all that sort of thing. And this one, right off the bat, there was criticism just for that as well, that it was boring, that it goes on about there's a dispute about taxation problems and all this sort of thing, and trading routes in space, which I'll just go around it. But the simplicity of it and seemingly rather boring kind of made sense in that this is the beginning of this conflict. It starts off rather quiet and simple, and no one quite sees it coming. It's somewhat like the beginnings of World War I, where it's a spectacular fashion of the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, but no one at the time thought that this would be the chain reaction that would set the world on fire, And here you have this dispute between the Trade Federation and the planet of Naboo, and, that's just 2 entities there unto themselves, and yet it just spirals out and causes all these problems. And, of course, the Phantom Menace, referring to the Menace of the Sith, which is, of course, Palpatine, otherwise known as Darth Sidious, who is manipulating all of this in the hopes of gaining power. And this sets one thing off after another, and that's the point of it, and that you just don't see it coming. And even by the end of the movie, they really don't understand what's happened here. So in that aspect, that's actually credible and good for the film. Even though, yes, in my opinion, of the 3 prequels, Phantom Menace is the weakest and the worst of the 3. But in recent years, it's nowhere near the worst Star Wars movie. So right off the bat, there's 2 Jedi sent to deal with this dispute, and suddenly we see it's Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, yeah, there he is, young Obi-Wan. We knew he would be in there and all this, but wait a minute, Qui-Gon Jinn? Yeah, this is one of the first big mistakes here. It's not a problem to have a character like Qui-Gon in it. It's a problem that he's suddenly the master, the teacher of Obi-Wan, that everything Obi-Wan knows he learned from Qui-Gon Jinn. The original trilogies are very clear on who Obi-Wan's teacher was. It was not Qui-Gon. There's a lot of teachers. He learned from a lot of different guys. But his main mentor, as far as the prequels are concerned, is Qui-Gon. I think that was a mistake. I think you still could have had the same emotional scene at the end, which, spoilers, Qui-Gon doesn't survive, and you could have had it where Qui-Gon was just another fellow Jedi Knight, a friend, and an influence on Obi-Wan, and you could establish that and have the same result. Because Qui-Gon is there, of course, to explore the prophecy of the Chosen One, which introduces Anakin, and he's also there to die for Obi-Wan to come into his own and avenge the death of his fallen friend and have his moment. And you still could have done all that without him being Obi-Wan's mentor, and restore the real story, which was Yoda was Obi-Wan's mentor and teacher and all that. But they didn't. It probably would have been better even if they had thought it through. I don't know when the ideas of Count Dooku came in, if they'd even knew about that at the time, if George had thought of that. Who was later revealed to have been Count Dooku was Qui-Gon's mentor, and then Count Dooku went rogue and eventually becomes a Sith and all that. But imagine if they had it where instead the Chancellor had sent 4 Jedi, so 2 masters and their Padawans. And so there you go. You got Dooku and Yoda along with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and off they go on this mission. Now the ages and stuff, but still, who's to say? And that probably would have kept that, within the logical sense of what was already established. And that's the problems with prequels. If you're not going to pay attention to what's already established, yes, it limits you, but that's too bad. You just got to figure out how to make that work for you. And I don't know. I don't know what the thinking was. Maybe they thought it would be too hard to have Yoda in scenes, and you would have to write around that to where you can't have him and Obi-Wan, doing the Batman and Robin thing the way Qui-Gon and Obi did in this movie. But that's the hand you're dealt. And again, I said, well, the masters and the students could have been separated, and so Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan still team up, and you pretty much have the same adventure for them, trying to protect Padme. So Padme, one of the big mysteries of the original series was, well, who was Luke and Leia's mother? Well, now you know. So a lot of Phantom Menace borrows heavily from one of the original drafts that George Lucas wrote for the original Star Wars, which was later adapted into a Dark Horse comic book series. So if you're curious, check it out. It's not the greatest thing in the world. The artwork's pretty cool, but you can see the similarities between Phantom Menace and that one, and understand that this was the plot that he drew on to come up with his Chapter 1. And probably should have borrowed even more from it and what the political situation was. And I kind of thought it might have been better if they looked more to World War I, where someone was assassinated and things sort of fall on to a young and inexperienced Padme, and she needs help from these Jedi. This also could have involved a certain scenario where Padme develops a crush on the young, dashing Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi. But Obi-Wan doesn't feel the same way. He's flattered, but he just doesn't feel the same way about her. And this creates a schism there for future problems between Obi-Wan, Padme, and Anakin. I mean, she accepts Anakin because, well, you got to love the one you're with. But this is the kind of thing of jealousy that develops between Anakin, even though Obi-Wan is like the only father figure he's ever had. But at the same time, there would be this deep jealousy, and that would give more credible motivation for his eventual turn. But I don't know, it just didn't happen that way. Jar Jar Binks is singled out as one of the downfalls of the whole thing. The one thing about him that bothers me the most is that it was already established who the comic relief was, and that was C-3PO and R2-D2. And I'll get to the problems that this movie creates there, which is really terrible and devastating. But Jar Jar, in and of itself, never really bothered me that bad. He's annoying and entertaining, but it's that one movie, and maybe the backlash is why he was limited in later chapters. But I just didn't really care. But to me, it's like he's taking up space from the comic relief characters that you already had and should have been better introduced. And the simple way to introduce them is pretty much the way R2-D2 is. He was one of the droids that the Naboo had. He was an astro droid. He was there to prepare the ship as they're trying to escape, which he does, and he's the only one who survives because, he's R2, And all you needed to do was that C-3PO was just always there, and he was one of theirs. The idea that he had to be introduced as having always been on Tatooine and built by Anakin Skywalker, and oh my God, they never noticed him, Darth Vader. I know there was here again, I'm not going to refer to the comic books. There was a comic book where they showed a scene where Darth Vader encounters C-3PO on the Cloud City in Bespin and all that, and it's kind of a cool thing where they're referring to this, where someone's trying to correct George Lucas's mistake here. Because he doesn't know these robots, all that. He just, those were mine. And it's just too cute and too much. Everybody's together on this, spanning the entire galaxy, and yet, and of course, the Force and everything. Yeah, but come on, it was just too stupid and completely and utterly unnecessary. And later on, the problems of the droids being here, of course, it's understandable that they could, because they're droids, so they can outlast all the years and everything. But then we see Obi-Wan in A New Hope, and he does not recognize R2-D2. In fact, he says, "I've never owned a droid." Well, that's not exactly true. Now, I suppose you could argue that he didn't own the droid that he's using in these prequels, but he has one, R4, I believe it was called. And you can say, well, maybe it was just assigned to him or what have you. But no, I'm sorry. But that's not nearly as bad as R2-D2 and C-3PO being around and Obi-Wan doesn't know them. The only real solution to this would have been that the two were very recognizable to the audience as to who they were, but that their names were different. So, I guess C2PO and R1D1, something like that. And then at the end, when their memories, and they both should have had their memories wiped, and they get their new designations, and it's, that's who they are, and all that. Because for R2 to have known everything, seems like he would have said, "Hey, you know who your dad is?" And all that sort of thing. But so that's the biggest problem here. Comes back to what's the big problem with the prequels. It's not just the plots in total, or the over dependence on CGI and all that, but it's not paying attention to your narrative, that these are prequels to already established stories. So if you're going to get to this future point, you can't just ignore it for your movie here, but they were, and so that's the biggest problems there. As for the rest of it, the dependence on CGI was overdone, and it really ages and dates the movies, and that's too bad. But the interesting thing about Darth Maul is he had a very distinctive look to him, and over time it's gotten better. And actually, I kind of wished he stuck around for the other chapters. I know he came back, and yes, it's canon now. He did not die at the end of this. Well, good Lord, how could he have survived? Well, the Force was strong in this one. So apparently, he used the Force to keep his guts in place. Where he uses the Force as well to construct himself, this monstrous-looking robot thing. And that, again, that's getting into cartoons and whatnot. But it is canon that he does survive and has cybernetic limbs as a result. And this seems to be the case with Sith people. Boy, they're really banged up and ruined. And you think someone seeing that would think twice before they fall into that, but oh well. So there you go with that. But the high point of the film was, of course, the lightsaber battles, despite the CGI backgrounds, which, boy, a lot of people will laugh at J.J. Abrams on flare, but good Lord, the lens flare, and that's it was everywhere, but of course necessary because none of it was really there. But the acrobatic abilities of the actor and everything, it was just the lightsaber fights were very spectacular. I'm kind of sad that the first encounter between Qui-Gon and Darth Maul is rather short there in the desert, but all that's really good, and it's the best parts about it. And the most fascinating character throughout the films is Palpatine, and almost like it's his story there. And so there's the highs and lows, and that was one of the high points of it. And no different here, even though you know who he is and what he's doing. They don't exactly just tell you, but yeah, I know you know, but we're keeping it secret for the purposes of the characters don't know who it is. And boy, you think they would have seen it. But then this is one of the parts that was the more interesting parts about the Jedi, but I just don't think they had enough there to convey this. The Jedi had gotten lazy and a bit corrupt in their own ways, and you see evidence of this even among the heroes, where you have several indications of Jedi just following their own passions. So even Qui-Gon does this. Once he becomes convinced that Anakin is the chosen one, he pretty much disobeys all the orders. He also indulges in using the Force to manipulate the outcomes of the betting on the pod race, which, the pod race. Look, I understood its purpose there and everything, but it went on way too long. But anyway, you see Qui-Gon doing this, and some of that you could take to mean why he was never on the High Council, because he was a problem with them. And then you later learn that Count Dooku was his mentor. So, boy, Qui-Gon might have been somebody who might have gone rogue had he survived. You don't know. But still kind of fell into the trap of bringing in the chosen one, who ends up resulting in the destruction of the Jedi, but ultimately fulfills the prophecy and destroys the Sith. But man, didn't know it was going to happen that way. But there's the examples of that, and it's the troubling matter. But because on the problem of the Jedi is this: they kept depending on their dogma, and this blinded them ultimately to the problems that led with Anakin. Had they been more open to Anakin and his love for Padme, they probably could have avoided this. But there you go. So you go back and forth where Qui-Gon's blatantly breaking the rules when he should have followed them, but at the same time, the Jedi shouldn't have been so rigid in their dogmatic approach to things and refusing it all. And still, it's interesting to where Yoda decides to do a 180 on that, because, well, Qui-Gon died and asked Obi-Wan to promise him to train him. Had they stuck to their guns, I guess Obi-Wan would be bound to leave the Jedi Order, but to still train Anakin out of his promise. So, I mean, what are they going to do? They hunt him down and kill them? I mean, I don't know, but it's a bit of a quandary there. But at the same time, that's kind of the lessons here of ultimately, because we see how Luke wins in the end by love. Yes, love found a way. His love for his father ultimately wins, and instead of sticking to the basic dogma of the Jedi, was that no, just kill him, and that'll solve the problem. And so the beginnings of that there, I just don't think it completely conveys that within the film itself. It's there, but not nearly enough. And I think more evidence of the corruption of the Jedi would have been better to give more credibility to Anakin's ultimate fate here, because that's the biggest flaw here. He turns way too quickly and way too soon and goes into things that I just don't buy that he would do it. And you can't just chalk it up to, well, the power of the dark side. Well, no. Especially it didn't always work that way. So Phantom Menace gets it off to a start at first with the over dependence on CGI and whatnot, and some bland dialogue, which is pretty much consistent with Star Wars, so I can't really knock it for that in total. But it still remains the weakest of the three, in my opinion. And but does it age well despite the special effects? Yes, it does, because, well, just when you thought you'd seen the worst, boy, you didn't. So, yeah, Phantom Menace is not the worst of Star Wars. It would have to go a lot further than what it did to achieve that, and it didn't. So, there you go, Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. And we'll continue next time with Attack of the Clones. Yes, that's right. So thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you. And apologies for my voice. I am suffering from a cold, and it's lasting a lot longer than I expected, but what are you going to do? Anyway, thanks again for watching and listening. Bye-bye.